Today I want to talk about something that I feel pretty passionately about, and that is our Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights, and especially why it's important to honor all the aspects of the Bill of Rights, and in particular the right to worship. Anyone who is a citizen of the United States is extremely fortunate. Why? Because we have the wealth and opportunity to attain goods, material gain. I once worked with a researcher at Bell Labs whose life's philosophy was epitomized by a little sign he kept on his desk: "He who dies with the most toys wins." In our last presidential election, one of the candidates promised to make America great again. What did he mean by that? Great in what sense? Because to me, America was always great. No, maybe certain opportunities or certain qualities of life that we have grown accustomed to having are not as easy for as many of us to attain as it was maybe 40 years ago. But if one looks through American history, there have been times where life for the vast majority of people was barely hand to mouth. We read about the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, Fords, and in more modern times the Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, or a handful of others. But for the greater part of our history, few people had material possessions beyond what they plowed out of the earth for sustenance. With its glitz and glamour, television skews the ideal of what America truly means. It might come as a surprise to some, but America never stopped being great from its inception. What makes America great is not the hope of wealth or a president who promises to return the lost American dream. That American ideal has never left us. It could. We could very easily lose what makes America great very quickly if we aren't vigilant. What makes America great is not the glitz, not the glamour, the fast cars, big homes, or 100-inch high-def television sets. What has always made America great is a 200-year-old parchment with some astounding words written on it: the American Constitution. And for those of us who are lucky to have been born citizens of the United States, or who have become naturalized, have been granted freedoms few peoples in all of human history have ever enjoyed. And they are freedoms granted us inviolate. When the United States was established as a nation, it was found necessary to add provisions or provisos to clear away any questions regarding what freedoms the Constitution guarantees. These provisions are called the Bill of Rights. Some of the most sacred of these rights, guaranteed us, are contained in the First Amendment, which reads, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievance." So important are these rights that the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, has the following to say about freedom of speech and religion. Getting an education isn't just about books and grades. We're also learning how to participate fully in the life of this nation. But in order to really participate, we need to know our rights. Otherwise, we may lose them. The highest law in our land is the U.S. Constitution, which has some amendments known as the Bill of Rights. However, with these freedoms, there are certain restrictions. In regard to religious freedom, the Supreme Court in the 19th century ruled against polygamy. The Supreme Court didn't want people justifying certain criminal acts as part of their official religious practices, like human sacrifice. But if the official religious tenets are within the bounds of the law, then people have the right to worship in whatever manner they want in any manner that they want, peaceably and without harassment. This is their First Amendment right. Now, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. But I strongly feel that if a person has certain religious convictions, they have the full right to worship without interference. Unfortunately, there are some who believe that their right to protest supersedes the right of individuals to worship peacefully without disturbance. It was never the intent of the Founding Fathers to allow one freedom to impinge upon the guaranteed freedom of another. Of course, it's a person's right to protest, but there are forms in which this can be done. It must be done lawfully and peaceably. And one of the problems is that those who do violate others' freedoms to worship believe they're justified in doing so. They argue that when great criminal injustices are done, that this gives them the right to protest in such a way so as to interfere with a group's religious service. Unfortunately, infringing upon a group's constitutional right to worship is by no means the way to right an injustice that has been done. Likely, the individuals who become the target of a protest are completely innocent of any of the allegations. Some argue that the members of religious organizations, or certain religious organizations, are so isolated that without direct confrontation within their worship setting, the members will never hear of the gross injustices being done by the religion. But where that argument fails is that we live in one of the most unique eras in human history. It is nearly impossible to so isolate people that they are not aware of the key issues in the world around them that have a direct bearing upon their lives. Chances are that anyone who has become an atheist or left a religion or a cult did so because of information they have found on the internet. Since the 2000s, the internet has had a profound effect and impact on society and the degree to which people have access to knowledge and can do so in complete privacy. If a person is so isolated from the world around them, then it's a personal choice. No one has that much control over another person where they are unable to obtain whatever information they may want to attain. If they don't attain it, they don't want it. And if they don't want it, they don't want to hear it either. So it doesn't do any good, and it's not effective. Never before in history of the world has there been a time where the average person can reach all corners of the world or have a voice that can be heard throughout the world. Yes, some religious institutions have individuals associated with the religion that have committed egregious criminal acts, such as child sexual abuse scandals, like the Catholic Church endured some decade ago, and how that rather than take the proper actions to deal with the offending priests through the criminal justice system, the church hierarchy decided to cover up these horrible crimes through moving offending priests from one parish to another. But once exposed, these coward cowardly actions by the church hierarchy damaged the church's reputation immeasurably. But finally, through this exposure, through this expose, through the information that has shone a spotlight on the Catholic Church, the church started doing the right thing. And through the legal system and freedom of the press, that those practices were exposed, and the church finally began doing the right thing. And whatever reparations and retribution that was necessary started being made toward the victims. However, the only thing that really that protesters that do such things can do is get some personal satisfaction that they struck back, and got some sense of self-satisfaction that they have gotten justice for themselves. But that doesn't really right the situation. And again, it's violating people's right to worship peaceably. However, protesters infiltrated church services and disrupted services to protest against the crimes. They would have been wrong to do so. It was not the Catholic laity that was responsible. They were victims, too, of the crimes committed by the religion. The other thing that people forget was it's not church doctrine to violate children. It was not they have the right to worship because it's not part of their belief system. It's not like we believe that human sacrifice is necessary for our religion. You see, it wasn't built into the religion. And so disrupting their services is disrupting their right to have a peaceful worship service. And that violates their First Amendment rights. There are ways of dealing with this through the legal system. Most worshipers believed in what the church stood for, except for how the hierarchy handled the child abuse scandal. It would have been wrong to prohibit the parishioners' right to worship by disrupting their services to protest the church's handling of the sex abuse scandal. This would have been a violation of their freedom guaranteed by the Constitution, the law of the land. Many decades ago, schools used to teach a course called civics. Civics curriculum covered how the U.S. government worked, how the Founding Fathers created 3 branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, and how they interacted with one another, the checks and balances that were put in place into government, the limits and constraints of power that were placed in each of the branches of government, so that one could not overpower the other. Students learned what those checks and balances were within the federal government, and that no laws can be enacted that violate the fundamental freedoms guaranteed to citizens in the Constitution's Bill of Rights. But about 40 years ago, high schools no longer taught civics. You never hear of a civics course today. Even when I was in school, they didn't call it civics, they called it social studies. And it's even questionable that schools cover much of social studies these days. And furthermore, many religious families have decided to school their children at home, homeschooling. And so it's very likely that people are not getting the level of education to give them a proper appreciation of how valuable and rare our Bill of Rights is. There has been nothing like our Bill of Rights up to its time in history. During the Civil War, President Lincoln once said that said of the Constitution that it was being tested whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. Will our Constitution continue to stand if we want our rights honored over the rights of others? Where there's injustice, there are means today to deal with it within the legal framework of our government. There is the right to protest peaceably, and as long as the protest does not violate another guaranteed freedom. And today we have the greatest power of all, the voice of the internet. If people continue to violate one another's rights, it'll be like the ACLU said, we stand the chance of losing these precious, precious rights that we have.